What happens when a decorated cop punches the wrong man, only to discover he's her boss, and he's been planning her downfall for years? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about how the truth can destroy you, or set you free. You won't believe how far this goes until the very end. Stay with us, because every second counts. Like the video, hit subscribe, and let's uncover the justice hidden in silence. It was the kind of Seattle night that felt like it had something to say. Damp air clinging to the skin, wind slipping down alleyways like it was looking for trouble. Officer Rachel Moore had seen nights like this before in her 20 years on the force. The rain painted everything in muted gray, and the empty streets looked more like a movie set than real life. She sat in her cruiser, fingers tapping the steering wheel, eyes scanning for anything out of place. Then she saw it, a sleek black Tesla Model S gliding through the fog like it didn't belong. No signal. Wide turn into an old marina lot where no one parked after dark unless they were up to something. Rachel flipped on her lights and eased the cruiser forward, her instincts already drawing lines around the vehicle. Something about that car rubbed her the wrong way. It was too clean, too perfect for a place full of rusted boats and busted street lamps. She stepped out into the cold, her boots splashing in a shallow puddle. She adjusted her belt and approached the driver's side. The window rolled down without a sound. Inside was a black man, maybe mid-40s, wearing a tailored overcoat and silk scarf. His face was calm, eyes steady. He didn't stammer, didn't reach, didn't explain. He just waited. Rachel didn't like that. People usually scrambled at traffic stops, fumbled for documents, offered excuses, gave her the upper hand. This man didn't. When she asked for license and registration, his voice came out smooth and measured. He asked why he was being stopped. She snapped back her answer, sharp and clipped. A turn signal. That's what this was about, at least on paper. But deep down, she couldn't explain why she felt the urge to press harder. Something about his stillness, his control, made her feel small. She asked him to step out of the vehicle. He hesitated, not out of fear, but as if weighing the decision. Then he complied, movements slow and practiced. He was taller than she expected, carried himself with a quiet confidence that didn't need to prove anything. She told him to place his hands on the trunk, and he did. That's when something inside Rachel snapped. Maybe it was the rain, or the years of pressure, or the way he made her feel like she wasn't the one in charge. Whatever it was, her fist moved before her thoughts did. She struck him, hard, across the jaw. The sound of bone meeting skin echoed through the lot. He staggered, but didn't fall. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he looked at her with something ancient in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, just certainty. She didn't know it yet, but in that single moment, her world had already begun to crumble. She ordered him back into the car, tossed his ID onto the seat, and watched him drive off into the mist. He didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't even look back. Rachel stood there, hand throbbing, heart racing, trying to convince herself she'd done the right thing. But deep in her gut, she felt it, that this wasn't just another traffic stop. That man hadn't looked like someone trying to get away with something. He looked like someone who knew exactly what came next. And by morning, she would too. Morning hit the city like a hangover. Thick skies, drizzle clinging to windows, the kind of weather that makes everything feel heavier than it should. Officer Rachel Moore walked into the precinct with a cup of stale coffee in hand, her jaw still tight from the night before. She told herself it had been just another stop. Nothing more. Firm. Controlled. She didn't regret it. Not really. Maybe she got a little too rough, but that's the job sometimes. People forget what it takes to keep order in a place like this. She leaned back in her chair, letting the warmth of the coffee settle the buzzing in her chest. Around her, the morning crew trickled in, boots squeaking across the floor, quiet hellos exchanged like background noise. No one looked at her differently. No one said a thing. Just how she liked it. That illusion didn't last long. The radio crackled and broke through the calm, blunt, almost bored. More. Chief's office. Rachel blinked. She hadn't met the new chief yet, hadn't even seen his face. Since Chief Heller retired, they said someone had been appointed temporarily, but no one knew much. Probably just paperwork, she figured. A check-in. She stood, fixed her uniform, and walked the hallway with muscle memory guiding each step. Past the wall of commendation plaques, past the corkboard of missing kids and dusty memos. She reached the door, plain, with a simple word etched on frosted glass. Thief. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She pushed the door open and froze. The man behind the desk didn't speak. He didn't need to. The bruise on his jawline said everything. The tailored suit. The same calm eyes. It was him. The man from the marina. The one she hit. And now he was sitting behind the desk where she thought no one would ever place him. Her breath caught, stuck somewhere between her throat and chest. He just looked at her. Not with fury, not even judgment. Just quiet, steady presence. She tried to speak. Tried to explain. Chief Rivers, I. But he raised a hand, stopping her with a motion so gentle it stung. His voice was level, smooth, without heat. You're on desk duty until further notice. That was all. No yelling. No questions. No performance. Just a statement. A decision. A verdict. Then he looked down at a file on the desk like she was already gone. Like she'd never been there in the first place. Rachel stood frozen for a second longer before turning around and walking out the door. The hallway felt different on the way back. Quieter. Like the walls themselves were listening. She dropped into her chair at her desk, her coffee now cold. Her rookie partner, Cruz, leaned over from the next cubicle with wide eyes. That was him, wasn't it? That was the guy from last night. She gave a stiff nod. Cruz whistled under his breath, the sound low like they were in church. Damn. You hit the chief. Whispers sparked around the room like dry grass catching fire. She could feel the looks already. Some curious. Some judgmental. Some with a bit too much satisfaction. Rachel forced a smile, tried to laugh it off. He'll get over it. But the words felt sour in her mouth. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for a pen and pretended to scribble something on a notepad. She told herself this was nothing. Just a bump. Desk duty wasn't suspension. She still had her badge. Her gun. Her pension. But deep down, something had cracked. Chief Malcolm Rivers hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't demanded an apology or made a scene. His silence was worse. It meant he wasn't finished. It meant the rules had changed. Rachel had always lived by one truth. Control the moment, and you control the outcome. But now, she wasn't sure who was holding the cards. And the man behind the desk wasn't just her superior. He was someone who had waited, watched, calculated. And for the first time in a long time, Rachel Moore didn't know what came next. The morning after her reassignment, Rachel Moore tried to carry herself like nothing had changed. Shoulders squared. Chin up. Same routine, same walk down the halls she'd known for 2 decades. But the atmosphere was different now, charged with something invisible but undeniable. People didn't talk to her the same way. Some avoided eye contact altogether. Others gave tight, polite nods that felt more like courtesy than respect. Her rookie, Cruz, barely spoke a word. Just typed, eyes glued to his screen, occasionally sneaking side glances when he thought she wasn't looking. At first, Rachel told herself it was nothing. Temporary. A weird ripple. But then the whispers grew louder, and the silence around her thicker. It wasn't long before her inbox dinged with a message flagged by internal monitoring. She clicked without thinking, then froze. Someone had uploaded cell phone footage. Not the cruiser's dashcam, but a shaky video from across the street at the marina. Caught everything. The moment she punched Malcolm Rivers. The sound of impact. His stagger. Her voice, sharp and clipped. His blood. The stillness that followed. And worst of all, the comment section. Over 200,000 views in under 24 hours. Seattle cop assaults black man in designer suit. Turns out he's her new boss. The headline hit like a brick. The captions were ruthless. The tags, unforgiving. Fire her. If this is what they do when the camera's off, imagine the rest. She shut the laptop with a snap, heart pounding in her ears. Her breath came short. She stood too quickly, chair scraping hard against the floor. All eyes turned toward her. Conversations stopped. Someone by the water cooler walked away mid-sentence. She rushed into the locker room and slammed the door behind her. Empty. Thank God. She sat down hard on the bench, elbows on knees, trying to steady her breathing. But it was no use. The video had been released into the wild. And now, the city was watching her fall in real time. Within days, everything snowballed. The local news ran the clip on a loop. Her name trended, but not like the old days when it followed praise or awards. Now it was paired with words like violent, racist, unfit. The media pulled archived footage, old arrest records, grainy body cam clips from years past. Stops she barely remembered. Moments she'd filed away as routine. They were all being picked apart, reassembled into a version of her that she didn't recognize, or maybe didn't want to. A version that was aggressive, quick to escalate, disproportionately hard on young black men. By lunchtime, protesters had gathered outside the precinct. First a few, then dozens. Then more. Signs waved above the crowd. Rachel Moore must go. Justice for the chief. Spray-painted messages on nearby sidewalks. We see you now. The precinct closed its windows. Inside, officers moved quietly, tension humming in the air. Rachel tried to act unfazed. Tried to keep her head down and focus on the paperwork. But every click of a mouse felt louder. Every glance from a colleague felt loaded. Her old friend Officer Jenkins muttered something as he walked past. She didn't catch the words, but the smirk was enough. In the break room, she sat alone. Her sandwich tasted like cardboard. The usual banter and laughter that filled the space was gone. Nobody sat near her. She had become radioactive. Toxic. Untouchable, but not in the way she used to be. When she returned to her desk, a new email awaited her. From the Oversight Committee. Request for public comment. Officer Moore conduct under review. Attached were allegations of excessive force, racial bias, and departmental impact. Clean, official, clinical. But the weight behind those words was crushing. Rachel tried to stay composed, tried to write up a formal response. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She felt exposed. Not just for what she had done that night, but for every decision she'd ever made in uniform. Every shortcut. Every tone of voice. Every hunch she'd followed that now looked more like bias than instinct. And through it all, Malcolm Rivers hadn't said a word. No press conference. No formal statement. Just silence. That silence echoed louder than any protest chant outside. It wasn't anger. It was strategy. And it made her realize something chilling. He wasn't reacting. He was executing a plan. One move at a time. And she was already 3 steps behind. Rachel Moore had always known how to handle pressure. Late-night standoffs, foot chases through alleyways, angry men twice her size. She'd face them all with steady hands and sharp instincts. But this was different. This was slower, quieter, and far more dangerous. Because it wasn't coming from the streets. It was coming from inside. The video of her punch had already exploded across the city. Her reputation was shredded. But she still held onto one fragile belief, that it would eventually blow over. That time, silence, and distance would dull the public's memory. That Malcolm Rivers, for all his calm and calculated moves, might stop at professional humiliation and not go further. She was wrong. It started with a message. A blurry still frame posted online. A figure in a hooded jacket walking down an alley near the South Seattle Community Center. 5 minutes before it caught fire. The building had gone up in flames just before midnight, an important local spot that hosted youth programs and community workshops. And now, someone was linking her to it. The video wasn't clear, but it was enough to raise questions. Enough to suggest. And in today's world, a suggestion was all it took. Rachel's phone lit up with messages. Did you do this? Were you there? Then came a flagged email from the Internal Affairs team. Request for comment on your possible presence at the scene. She felt her stomach drop. Her heart raced as she opened her laptop and saw the headlines. Suspended officer possibly tied to community center arson. Her image was already being passed around again, this time as a suspect. A criminal. She hadn't been near the building the night of the fire. At least, not during the time it burned. But she'd parked nearby a few nights earlier, just to think. Just to escape. Now, that moment was being turned against her. She tried to reach out, to Cruz, to her old friends on the force. No answers. Even her lawyer sounded unsure. We're getting heat from everywhere, he said. The mayor's office, civil rights groups, press lines lighting up. You're not just a personnel issue anymore. You're a political problem. Then came the silence from inside the precinct. No more updates. No support. No outreach. The badge that once gave her protection had turned into a target. She walked the hallways and felt invisible. Even the officers who used to joke with her now kept their distance. Cruz finally approached her, but only to say he'd been reassigned. Optics, he said. You understand. She didn't respond. She just nodded and let the emptiness settle. The final blow came when she opened her locker. Inside, someone had spray-painted 3 words in thick red letters: racist pig trash. The paint was still wet. The smell sharp. Her badge sat there on the bench like a stranger's. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just stood there staring, the weight of it all pressing down like concrete on her chest. She called her daughter. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Nothing. She left a message, voice shaking, asking for just one call back. No reply. The only person who responded was her sister, asking one simple question. Is it true? Rachel couldn't even answer. Then came the official notice. An internal investigation had been opened. New findings. Re-examination of old cases. Allegations of a pattern of misconduct. Her entire career was now evidence. Every stop, every complaint, every blurry clip from years past. They were building something bigger than a case. They were building a story. One that made her the villain from the very beginning. But the worst part wasn't the accusations. It was who they came from. Her old partner, Eric Dalton. 17 years of working side by side. Sharing beat patrols, trusting each other in the most dangerous moments. And now, he was giving statements to Internal Affairs. Volunteering stories of past stops. Moments when she'd crossed the line. Times he never once spoke up about until now. She called him. Straight to voicemail. No call back. Then he appeared on the news. Pressed shirt, clean-shaven, voice measured. This isn't just one incident, he said. It's a pattern. One we ignored too long. Rachel watched the screen in stunned silence. Her breath shallow. Her hands shaking. The man who once had her back was now standing on her neck. And all she could do was watch the city believe him. Rachel Moore had spent weeks drowning in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the type that feels like it's closing in, pressing against your ribs until breathing becomes work. Her name had become poison. Her past had been picked apart by strangers. She'd been accused, isolated, and betrayed. But beneath all that pain was something more dangerous than regret, resolve. She wasn't going to wait around anymore. The system had turned on her, and she knew better than to expect it to make things right. If she wanted any shot at clearing her name, she'd have to go on the offensive. And that meant digging, starting with the man who had quietly dismantled her life. Desperate and running out of time, she called David Renner, an old defense attorney who once handled drunk driving cases for off-duty cops. Not the best, but trustworthy enough. She didn't sugarcoat it. I need dirt, she said. Anything you can find on Malcolm Rivers. His time in Oakland. Internal Affairs records. Civil complaints. Anything that smells like a cover-up. David hesitated. Rachel knew the risk. Going after the chief could make things worse. But she also knew her instincts, and those instincts screamed that Rivers wasn't clean. A man that calm, that surgical in how he moved, didn't get to where he was without some buried secrets. A few days later, Renner called her back. He had something. A file. Thin, but dense with implication. 10 years ago, Rivers had been tied, unofficially, to a bribery scandal in Oakland. A suspected cover-up involving missing narcotics and a drug operation that vanished overnight. No charges were filed. No public fallout. Just whispers and quietly closed doors. Rachel read every page like it held her future. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to light a match. She didn't go to the press. Not the mainstream ones. They wouldn't touch her story with a 10-foot pole. Instead, she reached out to someone who had nothing to lose, Nina Wells. A freelance journalist with a reputation for taking on the stories no one else would touch. Nina didn't ask why Rachel wanted this out. She just listened, flipped through the file, and gave a single nod. When the story broke, it hit like a shockwave. Seattle police chief tied to Oakland corruption scandal. New documents surface. The same platforms that had torn Rachel apart now turned their attention to Rivers. People dug up old interviews. Photos from community events. Articles where he denied allegations that were now, suddenly, believable. The whispers turned into questions. The questions turned into noise. Protesters who once held signs with Rachel's name now held ones with his. Resign Rivers. Clean house. A wave was building, and this time, she wasn't under it. She was riding it. Then came the statement from the mayor's office. Cold, clipped, and brutal. Effective immediately, Chief Malcolm Rivers has been placed on administrative leave pending independent review. Rachel sat alone in her apartment, watching the announcement roll across the screen. She didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She just let out a long, shaky breath and whispered to no one at all, finally. She called Renner again. "I want my job back," she said. "Everything they took from me." He chuckled, not unkindly. "Give it a day," he told her. "They'll call." And they did. A review board hearing was scheduled. Her name was no longer just a headline of shame. It was a story of retaliation, of survival, of someone who fought back. But Rachel knew better than to celebrate too early. The silence from Rivers hadn't ended. He hadn't spoken to the press. Hadn't made a statement. Hadn't denied a thing. And that quiet made her nervous, because she recognized the move. It was the same one she used to make when she knew the next step would hurt more than the last. Still, for the first time in weeks, she slept with her phone on the nightstand and not under her pillow. For the first time, she believed the story wasn't over. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't going to end with her. Not this time. Rachel Moore had waited long enough. She'd clawed her way back from the edge, dragged secrets into the light, and watched as Malcolm Rivers, the man who had so carefully torn her world apart, was finally knocked off his pedestal. But even with the headlines shifting and the mayor's office scrambling, something still felt unfinished. The silence from Rivers wasn't retreat. It was a pause. And Rachel had been in the game too long not to recognize a man holding his final card. So, she made a decision. No more press leaks. No more waiting on committees. This time, she would confront him directly. Not with fists. Not with paperwork. But with something he'd never expect, his own words turned against him. She met with David Renner, her lawyer, and laid it out. "I'm going in," she said. "And I'm not walking out until the truth is public." He didn't try to stop her. Just handed her a discreet recording device and told her to be careful. "You're not bulletproof," he said. "Not anymore." She nodded, not because she was fearless, but because fear had stopped mattering a long time ago. The next morning, she waited in the shadows near the precinct until Rivers emerged. He looked just as composed as ever, briefcase in hand, suit crisp. No sign of the scandal on his face. No trace of worry. Just that same quiet confidence that had made her doubt herself again and again. She followed him in silence, trailing his car through the city, past blocks they both used to patrol. He eventually pulled into an underground garage connected to a city office building. She parked a block away, heart pounding, hands steady. Inside, she took the stairs. avoided the cameras. She didn't knock when she reached his door. She just walked in. He looked up. Not surprised. "Rachel," he said, as if they were old friends. She didn't wait for him to speak again. "Retract the suspension," she snapped. "You framed me. And I'm done playing defense. I've got backup. I've got proof." She turned toward the door, motioning for someone to enter. Jalen Cruz stepped in, eyes low, uncomfortable. "Tell him," she said. "You know I didn't start that fire. You know those complaints are fake." But Cruz didn't speak. Not at first. Then, slowly, he pulled out a small device and placed it on Rivers' desk. A recorder. Rachel's voice came out of it, clear and bitter. "These people think they own this damn city. They need to learn their place." Her own words. Caught in a moment of anger. A conversation she thought was private. A mistake, now weaponized. She staggered back, her voice barely a whisper. "You recorded me?" Rivers stood. Measured. "I didn't have to," he said. "You gave me everything I needed." Cruz wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "It was for the department. For my career." Rachel felt something crack inside her. Not rage. Not grief. Just a quiet, exhausted heartbreak. But then she remembered the device in her own pocket, the one recording everything now. She reached into her jacket, pulled out her phone, and turned the camera toward him. The red light blinked. "Live." "Say it again," she said. "Say what you did." Rivers laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think a live stream scares me?" She stepped closer. "Confess." And he did. Cold. Surgical. He admitted to framing her. The fire. The video. The pressure on her daughter. The silent campaign of ruin. Every move he had orchestrated. Every step he had calculated. The words poured out of him like a man who no longer cared who was listening. But someone was. Thousands of people. Watching in real time. By the time SWAT arrived, the feed had cut out, just a blur of movement, a shout, the camera falling sideways. Rachel lay on the floor, blood soaking through her sleeve, a bullet lodged in her shoulder. Her phone cracked but still recording. She woke up in a hospital bed, one wrist cuffed to the railing, her body battered, her voice hoarse. But she was smiling. The world had heard him. The world had finally seen the truth. And even though she was in pain, even though she didn't know what came next, she finally felt free. Rachel Moore didn't get the ending she imagined. There was no parade. No medal. No headline calling her a hero. What she got was a hospital bed, a gunshot wound in her shoulder, and a metal cuff around her wrist. The video of Chief Malcolm Rivers confessing had gone viral overnight, played on every screen in the country, shared, dissected, praised. But that didn't erase the fact that Rachel had walked into his office with a loaded weapon. That she'd gone rogue. That she'd broken the rules, even if it was to reveal a darker truth. She faced charges. Kidnapping. Brandishing a weapon. Reckless endangerment. Assault. The list was long. Her lawyer, David Renner, fought hard, argued that she had been pushed into a corner, that she was trying to survive a system that had already discarded her. The courtroom was cold and clinical. The judge stern, unreadable. The public had sympathy. Some even called her brave, but the law didn't deal in sympathy. It dealt in facts. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Rachel didn't make a speech. She didn't beg. She didn't apologize for the way she fought. She simply said, "I did what I had to do. And I don't regret a damn thing." The courtroom was silent. Then the gavel came down. Time served. 5 years of probation. No prison. No badge. No future in uniform. Rachel walked out the back door of the courthouse, ducking reporters and flashbulbs, and got into a car driven by her sister, Ellen. They didn't speak on the way home. There wasn't much to say. Not yet. Rachel collapsed into the guest room and slept for 17 hours straight. No sirens. No screams. Just the thick, dreamless sleep of a person whose fight had emptied them out. Waking up didn't bring peace. Her body ached. Her shoulder pulsed with every breath. But more than that, her mind wouldn't rest. She kept reliving it all. The moment she threw the punch. The betrayal. The setup. The confession. And the cost. She didn't go back to her old apartment. That place felt like a memory she didn't want to keep. Instead, she laid low. No social media. No press. Just quiet. But even in the shadows, her name still floated around. Some called her a whistleblower. Others called her unstable. But most people moved on. Just another scandal in a city that had seen too many. It took 2 months before she found work. A private security job at a warehouse by the docks. Night shift. Low profile. No uniform. No questions. Just keys, a flashlight, and silence. It wasn't much, but it gave her something to do. Gave her a reason to get up. Sometimes, during the slower hours, she'd sit behind the building, stare out at the water, and ask herself how it all happened. How she went from respected officer to national controversy. And every time, the answer was the same. Pride. Silence. Power. Not just from Rivers, but from her. She saw the moments now, the shortcuts, the assumptions, the anger she carried like a second badge. She didn't like who she had been. But she didn't hate her either. Because she was trying. Trying to do what she thought was right. And sometimes, trying wasn't enough. Her daughter still hadn't called. Ellen said she needed time. Rachel didn't push. She knew wounds took longer to heal when they came from trust. She wrote a letter, sealed it, and left it in the kitchen drawer. No pressure. Just words. Waiting. One night, she got a text from an unknown number. A photo. A mural painted on the side of a building. New faces. Bright colors. And in the corner, a silhouette in uniform. No name. Just a quiet figure, watching. Someone had turned her into a symbol, not of perfection, but of standing up. Of surviving. She didn't cry. She didn't even smile. But she felt it. A flicker. Not redemption. Not yet. But maybe something close. Rachel Moore had lost her badge. Her status. Her place. But she hadn't lost herself. And in a world that tried to erase her, that mattered more than anything. Rachel Moore knew her story would never be clean. It didn't end with applause or forgiveness or some perfect quote that wrapped everything up. It ended in quiet, in learning how to breathe again, in trying to live a life stripped of the badge she once wore like armor. And somehow, that was enough. She still carried the habits. Walking into rooms with her back to the wall. Watching people's hands first. Flinching at sudden noise. But over time, she began to soften. Just a little. Enough to sit at a cafe without checking every exit. Enough to smile at a stranger without suspicion. She was learning how to be a person again. Not a cop. Not a headline. Just Rachel. She volunteered sometimes. Quietly. No speeches. Just folding chairs after neighborhood meetings. Handing out water bottles during marches. Most people didn't know who she was. A few did. An older woman once pulled her aside and said, "Thank you for not disappearing." Rachel didn't know how to respond. She just nodded. That meant more than any official recognition ever had. At one of those meetings, in the basement of a worn-out church on the south side, someone stood up and said something that stuck with her. "We're not asking for perfection from law enforcement. We're asking for honesty. For someone who tells the truth, even when it hurts." Rachel sat in the back, head low, but she felt those words like they were meant for her. Because in the end, it hadn't been the punch, the press, or even the setup that broke her. It had been the silence. The years of looking the other way. Of letting pride guide her instead of accountability. She kept thinking about that. About how justice isn't always loud. It's not always in the courtroom or the protest chant. Sometimes, it's a man stepping down because the truth finally caught up to him. Sometimes, It's a woman refusing to stay quiet even when her voice shakes. Sometimes, it's just someone choosing to keep showing up. Rachel still had scars. Physical ones. Emotional ones. Some days were harder than others. Nights when sleep wouldn't come. Days when she'd see someone in uniform and feel the sting of everything she lost. But she didn't run from it anymore. She let herself feel it. Let herself heal on her own time. One evening, she passed by the precinct. The same building that once held her life, her pride, her identity. She didn't go in. She just stood across the street and watched. Officers came and went. New faces. New rhythms. She didn't belong there anymore, and that was okay. She wasn't trying to get it all back. She wasn't chasing restoration. She was chasing peace. And she was getting closer. Later that week, a young man recognized her while she was walking home. He looked nervous, holding a skateboard, probably no older than 20. "You're the cop from the video, right?" he asked. She braced herself. But he just smiled. That was badass. Then he kept walking. And Rachel stood there, stunned, but also oddly grateful. Not because of the compliment, but because she could finally face her story without shame swallowing her whole. The world had moved on. The headlines faded. New scandals took over. But Rachel had left a mark. Not a perfect one, but a real one. Her story became a conversation starter in classrooms and community centers. People debated her choices, questioned the cost, and argued about what justice looks like when everyone's hands are dirty. And that, more than anything, felt like a win. Because the story didn't end with her. It kept going. Rachel Moore didn't rewrite the system. She didn't erase the pain. But she stood up. She owned her part. She faced the consequences. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's messy. But it's always necessary. Because justice doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes, it walks away from one. Life doesn't always teach us through kindness. Sometimes, it strips everything away to show us who we really are underneath the uniform, the job title, or the image we've built over the years. Rachel Moore's story reminds us that power means little without integrity, and silence in the face of wrong is never neutral. It's participation. For many older adults who've lived through seasons of change, loss, and hard-earned lessons, this story is a powerful reflection. It's never too late to take accountability, to unlearn what no longer serves us, and to choose truth over pride. Even when the world misjudges us or we fall short, we still have the ability to stand up, not for applause, but because it's the right thing to do. Justice isn't always about dramatic moments in courtrooms. Often, it shows up in quieter ways. An apology, a changed heart, or a choice to walk away from something that once defined us. The courage to do what's right, even after we've made mistakes, is what truly defines character. If this message moved you, let us know in the comments what kind of stories you'd like to see next. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next powerful story that just might speak to something in your own life.